Hello and welcome to In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College. I'm Dr. Deborah Curitin and I work in Research Development at the University of Wolverhampton.
And I'm Dr. Ben Halligan, I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
Today's blog we're going to talk about the results chapter. It's not going to be a long conversation, but we're going to talk about some of the things that you'd expect to see in a results section or a results chapter of a thesis. So, other than, what it is that you found, what should people be discussing in their results section?
Well, I guess this is the meat and potatoes of the thesis, right? Because you've got your introduction, literature review, methodology, so that part one is all set up and things are ready to go. And then you actually have the research stuff itself.
Yeah.
And then beyond that you have maybe the analysis of the results, conclusion, other bits and pieces, and that's like the end of it. So you've got the middle section, which often coincides with the middle stretch of your time. If you're full-time, maybe your second year. And this is when you're in the lab, you're doing your results, you're in a field digging up stuff, you're doing field work more generally, you're in an archive looking at documents, you're reading various the case studies of the novels of the novelists that you're writing about, or something like this. So this is actually where you get stuck into the bits and pieces of what you're actually up to. Usually, from a examination perspective, there may not be a lot of discussion about this section of a thesis in the Viva Voce, because they may feel that what's in there is solid. It's more the way it's framed or presented, that they want to talk about. So often this great middle stretch of the PhD is kind of left as it is. But I'm guessing that, in answer to your question, what we would have then would be maybe a bit of narrative around, therefore, the first set of experiments with this, here's some data from them, or the first set of interviews occurred, see the transcriptions in the appendix, but these interesting elements have come out and I want to develop these in the second set of interviews. Or, okay, so we now move to the study of the first novel of 3 novels, and this is what we found, and these are the themes that emerged, which we anticipated from the methodology, or to sum a final example, we dug up this field and we found these bits and pots, and that suggests that Neolithic men and women were in this field and not some other field, and let's dig up some other field and find out what, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So there's a bit of a kind of story of the research and what's being found and the themes that are coming out. One thing, therefore, that I think should be factored in is some sort of pilot element. I think if you're supervising a student, a research student, and then they're going to go and do their field work and come back with all of it intact a year later, you might find that there are problems.
Yeah.
You might find that the fields didn't yield any pots, the interviews weren't giving the response to prove the thesis, etc. So I think that it's good to have some sort of stop and review and refine element in this middle section to check that the approach, the methodological approach, is functioning as it should, and if not, what do we do about that? How do we change it?
So I tend to, with my students, they do a pilot study. If they're PhD students, the pilot study in itself may form either part of the methodology section, or if it might form a study in its own right in the thesis. I don't think there's any hard and fast rules where that needs to be in terms of the write-up of the thesis. But with my professional doctoral students, because they have a much smaller space to write about their work, I often encourage them to write that as a paper and then to appendix that into their thesis, so they can say a pilot study was carried out in the method section. Pilot study was carried out. It yielded this is what we learned from it. In terms of the methodological approach, these are the changes we made. For further information, refer to that paper in the back.
I mean, I guess as well, Questions of the presentation of the results perhaps can come up at this point. I mean, especially if there are tables and data, you might need to begin to work out how best to present.
Yes.
Because most universities will consider the PhD in terms of presentational matters.
Yes.
And if numbers are too small or colours are too similar, so I think maybe part of this is grappling with, especially we're looking sometimes at big data or massive data, of how we present it.
That was one of the issues I had with my PhD. So I did an experimental PhD, and some of the tables that I had were so big that they would fall over a couple of pages. And how you deal with that? Do you make it smaller so it fits on one page? Because I was always told that a table should never go over a page. So it's trying to do a table that's actually readable, but is manageable.
And at the same time, I think you mustn't feel that we've completed this table, so we just move on from that. Don't worry about the raw data. I think you really need to archive and secure the raw data, because I guarantee 6 months later there's some further column that's needed in the table, so you may need to go back to the data that you collected. Well, there may be stuff in the data that that's not apparent to you that it's important, but it will come to be important later. So you're being very careful with the information you generate, and you're retaining it and not just thinking we've done it and you can just abandon it.
The other thing is as well that a table shouldn't be repeating something else. That if you've written about something and then you put a table shouldn't be so data shouldn't be presented twice in two different ways. You can present a table and talk about the table, but you shouldn't be repeating the information of the table in the way that you talk about it.
Definitely.
In terms of your results section, do you and again there's no hard and fast rule about this, but how do you feel about there being a section in there about the analysis of the data?
As you say, no hard and fast rule. I mean, typically to think about hard sciences, you would have, you explain let's say the nature of the experiments, and then you talk about the experiments that have been done, and then you include maybe the data they've yielded or what have you. And then you might save the analysis for a separate section, which maybe can be before the conclusion. Or it could be that the analysis needs to occur with the data, because in the analysis you've worked something out which will then determine the next set of experiments. So, I don't know, maybe it's discipline specific, perhaps.
Maybe.
As agreed with your supervisors, obviously. Yeah.
I mean, often with my students, we have a section on the analysis of the data and how the data was analysed and then what was found.
You can have initial observations. I mean, maybe that's a way of doing it. So you have a series of data from the experiment, initial observation. At this early stage, it would seem to suggest that, and then and then maybe in the full analysis, you can say, well, this initial observation, in fact, was quite correct, or how misleading or how incorrect this initial observation was. And I mean, sometimes in a way you're telling the story of the research.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, here's a load of facts for you that I've established. You're actually saying what you're doing and why and what you thought at this point. I mean, it's easier to defend a PhD in a viva, not by saying, look, here's the result, here's the conclusion I've made, and then have the examiners attack that. But rather than to say, here's the process, here's the story, here's the working out, this is why we went from this experiment to that experiment. Because often that's quite a logical, thoughtful progression, and it's harder to be negative about this than it is to just say, well, we don't believe the results that you've given us, so we're going to have a go at you over that.
One of the other things with qualitative research is sometimes the results section or a results and discussion section. So again, that there are discipline-specific aspects of the results section that you may need to take some advice from your supervisors about. And it may be that you start writing your thesis one way and then change it and write it another way. in the second draft. It will depend on how it reads as well. So Ben, results section tips.
I think that this is the section that needs to be written with a control of the data that's behind it. So this is the section that in a way is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So don't just saw off the tip of the iceberg and say, here it is. Make sure you've still got the iceberg under the water, which is all the messy raw data, the transcripts of interviews, the bits of pots from the field. Make sure you've still got all of that, because know that you will probably need to go back and start messing around with this particular section.
My advice would be read other theses in your area. Go and have a look at how other people present their findings sections. Have a look at their results sections, what they found in their research. Have a look at the types of tables or diagrams that they use. Have a look at how they write about those diagrams or tables, and to use other people's approaches as a guide. I usually tell my students, because at this point we often have had discussions about who might be the examiners, so to go and have a look at the work that those examiners have either supervised or previously examined, and see what their approaches are, and how they like data to be presented.
That's a very good idea. I mean, I think the other thing is this is a section that you should enjoy.
Yeah, it's about what you found. This is, the start of you telling the world about the contributions that you're making to either knowledge or practice.
Because if someone wants to research for a PhD, they're thinking about this, doing this, running these interviews, looking at this management structure, digging up this field. They're not thinking about, let me spend a year writing a literature review and then working out the philosophical underpinnings of my approach. I mean, that's the medicine, but this is the sugar, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So it should be an enjoyable section. Yeah.
So enjoy. Right, so thank you for listening to our vlog. As always, if you enjoy our vlogs, please do subscribe to our channel. You can press the notifications button to have notifications each time we release a new vlog. We tend to release new vlogs every Friday, so look out for new vlogs as they come. And if you've got any ideas for topics that you'd like us to cover, please do put them in the comments section below. So we look forward to speaking to you again. Bye.
Bye.